A very good afternoon and welcome to the latest in our series of HOP webinars brought to you by the HOP platform. So HOP stands for the Hertfordshire Opportunities Portal. It is a website and a series of social media channels, coincidentally enough, for the topic of today's session, designed for young people, for schools, for teachers in and around Hertfordshire. And we hope on here there's a whole load of resources for you that will help you with your pathways and your future career destinations. So the purpose of this webinar is to give you insights into the world of work in social media management and communications. We'll definitely be touching on what digital marketing looks like. So there's some strong ties and comparisons between those as well. I've got two excellent panelists with you today who are going to share with you their experiences and insights, and hopefully this will give you the inspiration you need and the insights you need to make those really next best steps if this is the career that you want to go into. So a bit of housekeeping first of all. For those of you watching this session live, so it's 4:30 on Thursday afternoon, we can't see or hear any of you, but hopefully you can see and hear us. But you do have the opportunity to interact. So I really recommend that you've made really good use of your time to come in from school or college to register and to watch this webinar as we're recording it. Do use this opportunity to ask questions. So when you hear from Lily and Sarah, anything that they're talking about or you want to know a little bit more about, you can do that. You haven't got to say it out loud. On the dashboard in front of you, you'll see that there is a questions arrow. If you click on that, it'll open out a text box. You can type your question in that text box. It'll only be visible to me, and then I can direct that question to Lily or to Sarah. So do make the most of that opportunity. This session probably run for about 45 minutes up to an hour. It is being recorded, so if you can't stay until the end of it, you will be able to catch up with it tomorrow and watch it in its entirety. Equally, if you've got friends or family members who you think would really benefit from watching this as well, you can share it with them. And I will share a link at the end as well, but we've recorded nearly 100 of these webinars now over the last 3 or 4 years. We cover a whole range of different topics. So do have a look at our library, which you can find on the HOP website. And you may well find something else there that will be of interest to you as well. So before we go on any further, I want to introduce my panelists. So very, very grateful that they've joined us today. So I'm going to ask them both just quite concisely to introduce themselves, and then we'll go in and we'll explore a little bit more about them and their careers. So firstly, just in the order that you appear on my screen, very good afternoon to Lily. Lily, I know that you used to go to school in Hertfordshire, so perhaps you'll tell us a little bit about that within your opening. Thanks for joining us today. Let everyone know a little bit more about you.
Yes, so I'm Lily. I'm a digital marketing executive. I'm currently working in St Albans, but as mentioned, I grew up in Hertfordshire and I went to school in Welwyn, so that's where kind of my ties to digital marketing started.
Thank you very much. And Sarah, we're delighted that you can join us today. Tell everyone a little bit about what you do and your involvement in social media.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm a social media consultant. So I've got my own consultancy, and I help businesses with mainly social media strategy and training. I also am a paid social tutor, so paid social media marketing tutor on a digital marketing program. And I've recently also started as visiting lecturer at the University of Hertfordshire. So there's a few different things that I do. All linked back to social media marketing.
Sure, thank you. So as you can hear, there are lots of expertise, lots of knowledge. And look, the first question I suppose I need to ask is, let me go to Sarah with this one. What do we mean by careers in social media? What sort of things are you and your peers and Lily, what are you doing all day, every day?
So on a day-to-day basis, so social media marketing, it's actually very broad. And I think many people often think it's just, playing around online and being on your phone all day long. There is some element of that, but ultimately there's a lot of planning and actually, I would say a lot of strategy that goes into social media marketing. It's understanding who it is that you're targeting on the social media channels, what type of content you're sharing. But on a day-to-day, it's actually also planning ahead. So what content are you going to be planning for the weeks, a week at a time or a month in advance? Then it's actually creating that content, the graphics, the videos, but also the copy, so the captions, what hashtags you're going to use, and all of this goes into then scheduling. So you've got everything, you're scheduling your content, then you're interacting with customers or your audiences daily. You're answering messages, you're answering comments, but also you're monitoring insights. So looking at how your content is performing on a day-to-day basis. Is anything you need to tweak? That's just one element of it. Then there's the paid side. That's all what we call organic social media marketing. And then you've got paid social media as well. So that's when you're putting money into the platform basically and advertising. But again, there's more there's more to it. There's quite a lot.
Sure. So so just I guess for my benefit really, some people who work in social media will work for I guess probably a large company, and that will be their full-time job, just to work for their company and to think about the content that's going out through their social media channels. Then we've got people like Lily who work for agencies. So Lily, tell us a little bit about what you do and sort of your involvement in the amount of different companies that you might be supporting at any one time.
Yeah, so I work with an average of kind of 5 or 6 companies week in, week out. It's just kind of a rolling contract with them to be their outsourced marketing department and run their social media profiles. As Sarah kind of touched on, coming up with those campaign ideas and planning out everything that we're going to be posting for them and how that's going to help them grow. So yeah, it's a real variety of different tasks and different platforms and just trying to run that all smoothly for them.
Sure. So you've got access to what you said, about half a dozen different companies, all their social media accounts at any one time. And I mean, how proactive are you, or are you reacting to things that happen? Are your clients giving you details of what they want you to put out, or how much of it is up to you?
So there's a real mix. We often kind of try and determine content pillars with our clients of the core kind of pillars that we need to be posting about all the time. So that could be if they're a service-based business, that could be the services they offer, or client testimonials, reviews, things like that. And those will kind of repeat week in, week out, coming up with new ideas and new ways to talk about those subjects. And then you have to be on that reactive side of it all the time. Just talking about current topics, things that are trending. If you've got sort of, say, an e-commerce client or something, you obviously want to be going viral and you want to be reaching as many people as you can. So you need to be jumping on those TikTok trends and stuff like that. So trying to find that balance can be a little bit tricky, and it definitely depends on the client, but I'd say you need a mix of both in what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. We spoke about this before we came on, but you obviously have to be really up on all those different social media channels and platforms and how to use them. Do you have ones that you prefer? Is there one that you like, your go-to one, or does it really depend on who your client is?
Yeah, see, it depends on the client. I think you need to get inspiration from the correct platform that you're using for that client, but my personal favorite is Instagram. I think it just kind of integrates everything perfectly. I'm not too sure about the new edition of Threads. I'm still undecided on that one, but in terms of the kind of carousel posts and reels and stories, I think there's just plenty there to get inspired by, and gives you a bit more freedom to be creative with all of those different formats as well.
Yeah, and I guess, and it must depend from client to client which ones are most relevant and appropriate for them. But do you find that you're having to introduce new platforms to them or encouraging them to use it?
Typically, yes, especially when we work with smaller businesses. They tend to stick to Facebook. That's where they're comfortable. That seems to be that kind of age group. That's the platform they've grown up using. Whereas for my kind of generation, we've grown up with the Instagram and TikTok. So that's where we feel most comfortable using them. But in terms of pushing a lot of people to be on LinkedIn and things like that, that is definitely something that we have to kind of introduce, and we have to push people to shout about themselves a little bit on there.
Sure. I mean, Sarah, coming to you again, you need to have that really broad knowledge of the functionality of all these different platforms. I mean, how much of your time do you taken up learning about them, and there must be changes in the way that they function, the way that they are used? So is that research and playing around with different platforms really key to what you do?
It is 100%. And I think most platforms have weekly, if not daily, new features. I think just an email came through today about, for instance, on Instagram, they're retiring guides, which has been a feature on there for a really long time. And it's that type of thing where you do need to stay up to date with the latest features, what's being removed and what's being introduced. They are changing daily. All the platforms are competing to some extent with each other, some more than others, Instagram with TikTok, for instance. But it is really important, because when you're working with clients, they want to be within their own industry, they want to be ahead, and they want to be ahead of the competition. So it's really important for them to be aware of those, and also knowing what's relevant to them. Not everything will be relevant to them, but that is really important. So there are different ways you can do that to stay up to date with what's going on social media. So personally, I'm subscribed to many different newsletters. I attend different webinars. I follow social media experts within the field. I try and do, courses. There are courses online, for instance, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. There are specific courses that you can do to stay up to date as well. But I think because it's changing, the best way is to really just get those updates from the platforms themselves as well. And as you said, also, I would say going into the platforms and playing around. So if there is a new feature, you need to learn it, because ultimately, if you're managing an account for one of your clients, you need to know how to use it. So it's also trial and error, and trying those different new features as well.
Sure, thank you. And by the way, I can see that there's a couple of questions being submitted already, so that's great. We will definitely come to all your questions that you're submitting, those of you watching this live. If you weren't here at the start, the way that you do that, on the questions tab on your dashboard, open that out, there's a text box, type it in, and it will come through to me. We will definitely get through to those questions. So Lily, look, let me ask you, it's a double-barreled question really. So what are the most enjoyable aspects of your job that you do? And then equally, I think it's really important that we cover this as well, but what are the challenging sides to it? I mean, do you, for instance, what your sort of hours like? Do you have to be up at all hours of the day to respond to and to get content out? Tell us a little bit about what's good and what's bad about the role.
So my personal favorite aspect of my role is I love design. I love being creative, so it's more that kind of graphic creation and making things look nice and pretty, and getting to be a little bit creative with coming up with content and what I'm writing about and things like that. That's my favorite, especially when you have a little bit of freedom from your client as well. They kind of trust you to go off and do your own thing. That's really enjoyable. On the flip side, kind of like you said, social media doesn't sleep. It doesn't have office hours. And so a lot of the time, especially when you're logged into client accounts, you're kind of watching those notifications or inquiries come in, and you need to respond quickly. You need to be reactive to things, as we said. If you're seeing kind of a surge in engagement, you need to know how you can use that. So you do kind of always have to be switched on, which, yeah, is the trickier side of it.
Yeah, that's great. So, I mean, take for example, full transparency here, Lily, you and your organisation are going to be working on the Hop brand. So Hop that we've spoken about already. You guys are going to be doing some work for us on that. You'll probably be managing some of our social media accounts. Generally, how much control would you like to be given over content and what you create? Because clearly you're talking about how much you enjoy the creative side of that. Do you find that some clients are very sort of regimented in what they want going out, and some really give you carte blanche to do as you like?
Yeah, it is kind of from one extreme to another. There's some people who know exactly how they want everything, and that's absolutely fine because it's their brand, it's their business, and they know what they want in their head. They just need someone to execute that, which is absolutely fine, and that's what we do for them. And then you get brands that are more like completely, you guys know what you're doing, just go off and make something and check in with me every now and then, and we'll have a look and see if we like it, basically, which sometimes that can go the other way, because you do need a little bit of guidance from the client. You want to make sure that your tone of voice is correct, that you know you've got their branding spot on. You need a little bit of information about what they do, especially working in an agency. Obviously, we're not in their business day to day. We don't know their services in and out like they do. So we do need that little bit of input from the client to just kind of help us give a general direction to the content and stuff that we're creating. So it's finding that balance between being very regimented and, you know, getting that little bit of input that you need.
Sure. And Lily, let me ask you this question as well. Was social media something you were always interested in? Did you ever see it as being a potential job, or was it just something on a personal level you enjoyed doing? What was the sort of the genesis of this for you?
So it wasn't until I went to college and actually studied beauty therapy, which then soon after I got a job in hospitality and I stayed in that industry for a while, and then we went into lockdown, and it wasn't until sort of the beginning of lockdown, when I was still working in this hospitality industry and they decided to have a rebrand, that I helped them with that. And then I took over their social media profiles and realized I actually really enjoy this, and I knew I always wanted to do something creative, but I wasn't sure exactly what it was, until I had the opportunity to kind of manage those profiles. And then I thought, well, I definitely want to get some qualifications in this. Obviously, I was already out of college, so then I looked into apprenticeships, which is where I found this role. So I did my level 2 digital marketing apprenticeship here, and finished that, and then I was very lucky in that I was offered a permanent position here as well. So it was a very kind of winding road that I took to get where I wanted. It definitely wasn't straight from school. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and it wasn't something that I ever really considered in school either. I don't think it was spoken about all that often as kind of a career path, and it was something I just sort of stumbled across, but I'm definitely sure it's the right job.
Were you, on a personal level, were you quite prominent on social media and different platforms? As a, thinking when you were at school yourself?
I have not very many followers on my personal account. I just kind of use it to share the odd bit here and there. Definitely not on a influencer scale in any means, but I did used to do a lot of digital art, and so I created an Instagram account for that, just to share things like that. And so that aspect of it kind of linked into the social media management and running, an account as such, and being a little bit more creative with that than just posting a selfie. So yeah, I think that was kind of prior to managing that rebrand and working with that cafe. That was kind of all the experience I had.
Yeah, wonderful. Sarah, do you think, is there a correlation between people who as individuals are maybe very good and got lots of social media accounts and got lots of followers? Are they naturally going to be good at then taking that to working for a company, or actually maybe are there some reasons why that sort of individual wouldn't be so good in that environment?
I definitely think that there are some transferable skills, because if they do that on a day-to-day basis, they're posting, they're engaging with their community. Actually, that's probably one of the key skills, one of the important skills, I would say, when you are managing an account, is being able to engage with your audience and build a community. It's one of the key things, actually, to be able to build an account. So I definitely think that it would be an advantage, and having had that experience, they can obviously bring that into their new roles. And again, then they can learn some of the other aspects of social media whilst they're in that new role. I think there's a bit more to it than just posting. There's, as I mentioned at the very beginning, that you do need a strategy, and you do need to understand, especially if you're working on client accounts, would be to understand who their audiences are. You need to understand the strategy, what platforms are going to work. So it might be they're an influencer on TikTok or Instagram, but actually when they go in and manage a client account that's maybe on X or on LinkedIn, or Facebook, then they need to be aware of the differences on the different platforms as well.
Yeah, okay, fine. Well, look, that's pleased that you've said that, because that's a really good segue into our next sort of section of questions that I wanted to ask you, which is the actual pathways that you need to go into. So, I mean, first of all, let's take it back. Looking at the audience and who registered here, we've got lots of sort of year 10s, year 11s on with us today. So perhaps just thinking about whether they're going to go to college, thinking about A-levels, for instance, or maybe beyond that. But I mean, Lily, going back to you, knowing what you know now, if you knew that this was a career you wanted to go into, would there have been particular choices you would have made once you finished year 11? Would you have gone to college? Would you have chosen A-levels? What do you think are really essential subject areas?
I mean, personally, for my GCSEs, I took media, which ended up being very useful. That was a really good kind of core subject to have. I also took graphics, which wasn't necessarily kind of graphic design as such in school. It was, I think my GCSE task was making a pop-up book, but it's still that good experience of kind of showing creativity and showing that strategic thinking and thinking a bit outside the box. I think had I have stayed on at A level, I think psychology definitely would have helped. There's a lot of psychology and marketing for sure. I know a lot of people in the office who took psychology at A level, and that has really helped them. And quite a few people in my office as well I know took business, and I think that kind of helped them a lot, especially working with a lot of businesses, to kind of understand that kind of what they need to grow, and how we can help them do that through our marketing channels as well.
Sure. So you say no subjects are essential, but there are some that are going to be useful and will give you some good understanding of what this might entail. Sarah, I mean, English sounds like it's the obvious subject, because presumably there's some sort of language techniques that are going to be really useful. I mean, when I used to have what was then a Twitter account, I could never say what I wanted to say within 180 characters. So what are the sorts of language techniques, though, that you find someone who's a really good social media manager would have?
Oh, very good question. I'm trying to think now. You've got to be able to, I mean, I understand that the character limitations, all the different platforms, the platforms are different, and you're going to have different number of characters. What you need to be able to do, I think there is an element of copywriting and being able to write within social media. So it's being able to understand what your client does, what is it that you're trying to say to your audience, and trying to capture that. And there are ways of, I would say, writing the perfect caption. So, you know, within social media, so understanding that there is a little bit of a structure, even in a small number of characters, even if you are limited, and trying to be as concise as possible. But obviously that one, I would say, with X or Twitter is the platform with the smallest number of characters, whereas the others you have a lot more to write, so you can follow a bit more of a structure. So for instance, having an introduction, or I'm trying to think of the word now, you might be able to help me, Lily, or the opening, I'm trying to think what the word is, but basically, and then having like a key component to your caption, and then like having a call to action at the end. So asking your audience to do something, whether that's to go and click on something, or to read more, or to or even ask them a question and trying to increase engagement. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question there. I've gone into the detail about how to write caption, but I think that is quite important. Being able to write is quite important in social media, because even though I would say the creative, so whether that's your video, your graphic, your carousel, is important, because that's ultimately what stops people in their tracks from scrolling. For people then to go and read what you're writing, that's equally important. That I would say would be next. So you've got to be able to have, oh, I know what the word I was looking for, a hook. So something that's going to stop people, and for them to read your caption.
Yeah, I've gone with, well, Lily, elaborate this a little bit for us on this. What are the language techniques that perhaps may resonate with people watching this at the moment, because they're studying them in English or in other written subjects at the moment, that you use on a day-to-day basis? Sarah just talked about getting that hook so that someone doesn't scroll past you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many. You've got to be thinking about how you can convey emotions in what you write. You've got to think about kind of the descriptive language that you can use, especially if you're trying to sell a product. You can't physically shove the product through someone's screen, so you've got to do your absolute best to describe it and describe the benefits. You've got to be really good at changing up your tone of voice, especially kind of per platform. The audiences are going to change, so you need to shift that tone a little bit. Especially if you're working in an agency, you're going to have lots of different clients that work in lots of different industries. You need to learn some of the technical knowledge. You need to be changing your tone all the time. You might be writing as if you're one person, say a business coach or something, and you've got to make sure you sound exactly like them. Or you could be writing as a team of interior designers, and you've got to make sure you're using the right language that they would use. And yeah, there's a lot of different techniques, and you've got to make, as Sarah said, really, you've got to make your writing engaging, because that's what's going to get people to follow you or click on your profile or go to your website and kind of invest in what they've just read.
Sure. Okay. So it was a very long time ago that I was studying GCSE English. Lily, it was clearly a lot more recent for you. But I mean, can you remember being taught these things in school? Did they sort of come back to you when you're actually practicing these things in work now?
Yeah, I mean, definitely in school you're taught how to kind of make your writing exciting and creative writing. You're taught how to obviously use descriptive language and stuff like that. And it definitely does come back to me a lot now. I can't remember everything that I knew in school, unfortunately. And I do have my thesaurus open quite a bit on my computer, but yeah, definitely a lot of the techniques in English language from school you will use when you're writing copy.
Great. So there you go, folks. Go and tell your English teachers about this webinar. Tell them to watch it as well, because it's going to help them when they're explaining the relevance of English and why it's so important in the wider world. Sarah, people might be watching this at the moment thinking, well, we'll find out more about Lily's apprenticeship in the moment. But I might think, oh, look, I really want to go to university. This is a career I want to go into. Do you think there are specific even degrees, courses that people should be doing, or ones that you perhaps recommend them to go and do? Are there degree courses in social media per se now?
There are digital marketing courses. There are you can choose one of those at university, but I actually didn't study university. I didn't study digital marketing or social media marketing. When I went to university, it was a long time ago, and I did international business. But there was some marketing modules, and we did consumer behavior and marketing communications and so on. But I think now there are definitely some courses that you can do. You can also look at CIM, which is it's the Institute of Marketing. They also have degrees. But I do want to say, even though I have been to university, but I did start in a different career, and I changed into social media marketing. And the reason I'm saying this is that you don't necessarily need to go to university to work in social media marketing. I know, Lily, you've got your own career path for this, but I did want to mention something else. There are programs out there where you can do 11, 12-week programs where you're learning digital marketing and a speciality. So whether that's paid social, paid search, or programmatic. And at the end of that, you can interview for roles and get into the industry. And I'm saying this because I'm working on a program and I'm teaching on a program where me and the other tutors were helping young people get into digital marketing without going to university. So there are pros and cons, I think, with every avenue that you go down, but I just want to mention that because there are definitely other routes that you can consider as well outside of university.
Sure. Okay. Well, look, Lily, tell us about your apprenticeship. Did you say it was a level 2 or level 3?
I believe it was a level 2.
It was a level 2. And what was the content? What were you studying?
So it's broken down into kind of 3 sections. The first one is relationship marketing, and then it's broken up a little bit weirdly because there's much more to digital marketing than these sections. And then it's broken down into coding, which luckily doesn't feature very heavily in my role because I'm not very good at coding. That was way above my head. And then it was the kind of graphic design side of it. And that was over 15 months. You worked on those kind of 3 sections whilst also being in full-time employment. So the way we worked here was it would be 4 days a week working on clients as normal, and then on Fridays we would do our apprenticeship work all day. So that would just be catching up on assignments and things like that. Most of the assignments were writing up all of your campaigns that you'd been working on. So if I'd been working on a giveaway campaign for a client, then I'd write all of that up into my apprenticeship portfolio and attach evidence of the kind of techniques I used, the results I got. So just proving that I was kind of doing that on the job work as well. And then I had 2 exams. So relationship marketing and coding were the 2 exams. And then to finish off, you do a synoptic project where they gave me a fake client, a fake business and a fake brief, and I had to go away and create this whole marketing proposal for them and show them their return on investment and everything I was going to do for them. And then you have an interview to kind of go over everything you've done in your apprenticeship, and then they send you your final grade after that. So yeah, it was a long, it sounds like a long process, but it went very quickly because you are working full time at the same time. And so it just absolutely flew by.
Yeah, and just tell us, how did you find that apprenticeship? Was it through your employer, Amber Mountain, or did you find it through a college or through a training provider?
So we're quite a unique company in that we work with a lot of apprentices, as we offer some of our clients apprenticeship packages. So that's kind of offered for smaller businesses so they can have affordable marketing services by working with an apprentice. And so they were advertising the role as a marketing apprentice. So I applied at my company, and then they sorted out kind of all the technical apprenticeship side of it. It's through a company called QA. So yeah, it was through this role.
Yeah. Okay, great. So look, that's a really good example of a fantastic apprenticeship route into this role. Sarah, just want to ask there, that bottom question I've got on the screen there at the moment. Are there ways of gaining experience in social media without actually having a formal work experience placement? And I guess people can play with their own individual accounts here, but what would you recommend to someone just to find out a little bit more about whether this is the sort of career for them?
I would probably look at different social media platforms. So maybe going on to ones that you're not used to going on. So something like LinkedIn. You could, I don't know if it's quite the same experience, but you could look at the type of roles that are being advertised. So whether that's social media executive or digital marketing executive, and just seeing maybe even the skills and what's being asked for that specific role. So you can understand a bit more about what it is they're looking for. So there are, for instance, there's a lot of creativity that goes into social media marketing. So you could potentially go on Adobe or try and get to know a bit more about whether Canva or Illustrator or InDesign, and start playing around a bit with those programs, for instance, which are quite important in social media marketing. So there are certain things that you can do, I think, to try and get that experience. But I think the only other way would be for you to do it yourself and to try and post content. One example would be LinkedIn, and I think that would be quite important. I personally think it's you're never too young to join LinkedIn. I mean, there is obviously an age limit, but set up a profile, start posting content, add any projects that you're working on in school that you're proud of and that you would like to add any skills that you're building. And I think as you start your careers, then you can start adding to that and you will start building your profiles more and more. But I think that would be, for me, one of the good takeaways I think from this would be to go and create a LinkedIn profile if you don't, and just see what's going on the platform. It's not what it used to be. I feel like it's very, very different. It used to be very much just a professional platform, whereas now I think there's a really good way of making connections and looking at maybe companies that have social media marketing roles or digital marketing, and seeing if it's something that you want to do, and looking at their profiles, and you can build an idea of basically the type of businesses that you want to work with, but also make connections, connect with the recruiters or people who are doing those roles at the minute. So I think there are really good ways that you can already start looking at what you want to do next.
Sure. Lily, anything that you'd add to that, experiences people could gain?
Yeah, I mean, definitely kind of just going away, you can get free trials in Photoshop and Canva and things like that. Just playing around with those tools, seeing how far you can get. There's hundreds and hundreds of YouTube free tutorials on how to get started with these things, and lots of websites like Hootsuite have different articles on different places where you can get experience or free kind of creative courses that you can take. And I think that also really helps when it comes to a point where you've got an interview for a social media role or something like that. If you've shown that kind of willingness to take yourself to work on it, and just practicing your own skills, and that kind of passion for it really shows through when you do get to a point where you're interviewing for roles.
Sure, and I suppose just the obvious thing to do is everyone could have a look at their school social media accounts, or possibly ask if they'll give you controls over them as well. That might be a good way to get started as well. Right, just moving on then, before we come into the questions, I had a number of questions that have come in, so thanks for submitting those. You have still got time if you want to ask Lily or Sarah anything that we haven't covered already. So really, Sarah, what I want to know, or just reassure everyone, is that there is a future role out there for everyone who wants to go into social media and communications management here. Is it something you think there's going to be greater demand for? Are we going to get to a point where Lily's so good that she's cornered the market and there's no room for anyone else?
So social media marketing has been growing month on month, year on year, and it has been for the last 15, 20 years. And I think it's really important because most businesses are on social media. It's a really good way for businesses to reach their audiences and to grow. But also, I think it's important to mention that also the paid media side of social media marketing, so paid social, is growing phenomenally. Even now, with the economy, it's still growing, and there are many jobs. And actually, I feel that businesses are struggling to fill those demands. So I do think that there's definitely future demand for the industry. I don't think it's slowing down anytime soon. And I think some people might be scared about AI, for instance. Is AI going to be, slowing that down? But actually, not at all. I think it's going to be complementing what we currently do in the industry. So I definitely think there's future demand for the industry.
Sure, good. And Lily, presumably you're happy that there's going to be plenty of opportunities for you as someone already in industry?
Yes, definitely. And I mean, it is something that working as a digital marketing executive currently, there's lots of opportunities to go from here and specialize in certain areas. As we've said quite a few times, it is such a broad range of tasks that we have to do on a day-to-day basis that you could go off and specialize in email marketing, or as Sarah mentioned, you could specialize in paid advertising. You could go off and just specialize in influencer marketing. So there's so many different routes that you can go down with it as well, that it's not just you work as a social media manager or a digital marketer and then that's kind of as high as you're going to get. There's so many different opportunities to keep expanding from there.
Great. Okay, thank you. Well, look, I think that reassures everyone, and as Hertfordshire is no different to anywhere else, really. There's going to be those opportunities. In fact, we've got a question about remote working coming up. So here are some questions that have been submitted. So there's a few that are in here. So first one, and I'll give you both the opportunity to answer this one. Lily, if you want to answer it first, and Sarah, you can have a second go at it. As a social media manager, how do you create content for a brand if you aren't knowledgeable in the industry that yourself?
Yes, now this is when you need to be talking to your client. You need to understand exactly what they want to be conveying, the information that you need to know. You also need to do your own research and go away. For example, I work with an accountant. Now, I'm not trained in accounting whatsoever. I'm not up to scratch with all the different tax laws for businesses and things like that. So I have to go away and do a lot of my own research. I'm subscribed to newsletters that keep me updated on all this information. And then I have weekly catch-up calls with my client as well before I write their content, just to make sure that I really understand what I'm writing about.
Sure, that sounds like a great answer, and that probably covers everything, Sarah. I mean, you work with lots of different. No, don't be sorry about it, Sarah. You work with lots of different companies, and you're training them. I mean, how much do you need to know about who they are and what their industry is before you start going into work with them?
I always tend to do an audit, so that means looking at their current social media accounts and trying to understand a bit more about what they do. And for instance, when I look at strategies, I'll also do competitor analysis, so I understand a bit more about what their competitors are doing in the industry, so what they're doing on social media, who's following them, what type of content they're sharing. So I always do a bit of research from that point of view. But I think it's, as Lily was saying, you do need to have that ongoing communication with the client, and they do need to share, especially if it's accountants or any kind of sector like that you're not familiar with. They do need to share a lot of the information, and you need to be clear about any upcoming specific dates. So if there's like self-assessment dates and those type of things. So I think it's just really important that you have that communication with your client, and that if you're not sure about something, you just check.
Sure. Okay. Sounds like good advice. Another question here. This comes into sort of working environment. So the question is, I have a chronic illness. I find it quite hard to go into an office job when I'm dealing with symptoms. Would you say there are many fully remote job opportunities in social media marketing? So Lily, let me come to you first of all. How often are you working in an office? I know you're in the office at the moment, but is it the sort of role you can do from home by yourself?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on the employer. For example, we're in the office 4 days a week, and then we work from home on a Friday, which is quite nice. Some employers leave it completely up to you. I have friends that work in offices in London, and they can choose whether they want to be in 5 days a week or they could be in 2 days a week. It's completely up to them. It is quite fortunate because it is a job that you can do as long as you have the tools you need, as long as you have Wi-Fi and a laptop and access to all of your social accounts. Then you can theoretically work from anywhere. So I think as long as the employer that you're working with is understanding and is flexible in that sense, then yeah, there is a lot of opportunity there to kind of be hybrid with your working.
Sure. I mean, Sarah, presumably you've seen this as an industry, particularly pre and post pandemic, that working environments have changed. And does this role itself lend itself quite nicely to being able to work independently?
100%. I think it's definitely the type of role that you can do independently. But I do think it's worthwhile mentioning, from what I've seen from working with agencies in London and entry-level roles in the industry in the last 18 months, that very often the entry-level roles tend to be more office-based or hybrid. So as you said, Lily, 2 to 3 days a week in the office. Whereas what I tend to see more of is the little bit more senior roles that tend to be more remote. And I think that's just simply because in the early stages of your career, you're learning from people and you're being in the office. But I think that's not the majority. So I think there are options to work remotely, but I think it would depend on the company itself.
Sure.
So I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm just explaining what I'm seeing in the industry. I think it would probably be the dependent on the company more than anything else, but there are options.
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely. And I think the advice here generally would be, no matter which company you're looking to work for and which industry, just be very open with a prospective employer when you're going through the application process. They'll invariably be very understanding and try to be very accommodating around illnesses or disabilities, and trying to create an environment that is right for you to work in. Next one. So this is not a question, so you haven't necessarily got to respond to this one, but it's an observation. So the IT Level 3 BTEC has a unit in social media which might be useful for year 10 and 11 students who don't know what to pick for sixth form college. So I guess that's good advice there. You can perhaps broaden your choices there by doing a more general IT level course, and you may well find that there are different elements of that are more interesting for you. Lily, have you found that there are aspects of IT that have sort of been opened up to you? I mean, you spoke about coding and that perhaps not being the top of your list, but are there other areas of IT that you'd never perhaps encountered before that you're now using and more aware of?
Yeah, I mean, things, obviously I did mention coding, using web builders, website builders, even things like Wix, WordPress, Squarespace, things like that. Obviously clients come to us with these websites and we have to update them and things like that. So on a more technical side of it, I think that IT experience is really useful.
Sure. I mean, if you're interested generally in IT, we did a webinar last month about web designing. So have a look at that. You'll find that on our Hop platform as well. That may be of interest for you. This one I quite like. Is it really frustrating when you come up with some content or a post and then it gets spammed? So what I think I mean by that is you then find someone who just puts in a generic advert for something after it. Or let me open this question up more broadly. When you create some really good content and then someone then responds with a complaint or something completely irrelevant to the one that you put there, does it sort of take you off course a little bit? Is it a bit frustrating, Lily? Has that ever happened to you, first of all?
I don't think that specifically has ever happened to me, luckily. I've definitely had it before where I've spent a lot of time working on something and been really pleased with it, and it has not performed as well as I expected at all. And in those situations, you kind of have to take a step back and look at, okay, well, what time was it posted? What have I done differently with this post? Why has this suddenly changed? But in terms of kind of getting negative feedback on something you're really pleased with, I think it's easier said than done, but take it as constructive criticism and go back to the drawing board, and hopefully it won't happen again.
Sarah, I mean, any experiences where perhaps a post that you've created has then been taken off in a slightly different direction from where you'd hoped it was going to go?
I've had that before where people from the same industry comment and take it in a different direction. But that's more on LinkedIn, where I think people do share their opinions, and it can go either way. But I think that, I don't know if I just want to go back to the question with the spam bit. Did they mean, getting, promote your post here or that type of thing? Because I think that's something different. That's something where it might be a hashtag that you've used that these companies are following and just spamming. So I feel like it might just be that, looking at what you're using more specifically.
Yeah, no, okay. And then another question that I'm going to ask based on something that you've just said there, Lily. You talked about the timing of a post and how important the timing is. I mean, how much of a science is there to know when and specifically when to post something and on which platforms?
So obviously you want to be posting, when you're posting any content, you want to be getting good engagement. You want to be reaching as many people as you can. You want to be reaching a relevant audience, and you want people to be actually engaging, so liking, sharing, things like that. So the time is very important, because you want a time where your followers are active. You want a time where people who maybe aren't following you are active, so you're reaching new audiences as well. Luckily, on most platforms, within kind of things like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all have analytics and insights built into those platforms. So if you view your insights on Instagram, it'll tell you when your followers are most active. So it could be 6 p.m. So if you were to post around 6 p.m, then you know that a lot of people are going to be on there, and they're going to be kind of active at that time that your post is going out, which, when you're getting a lot of engagement, as soon as your post goes out, it boosts it even further, if that makes sense, because Instagram will take that and it'll go, oh, people really like this post and it's only been up for 10 minutes, so we're going to show it to more people. Whereas if it's been up for 10 minutes and no one's liked it, Instagram goes, oh, actually this isn't very relevant content for anyone, so we're not going to show it to many more people. That's a very kind of basic analogy of how the algorithm works on Instagram, but yeah, the time is definitely really important. It's not an exact science. Obviously you can't see real-time data of when everyone's on their phone and when everyone's looking at your profile, but yeah, there's sort of insights and tools that you can use to make sure that you're posting at the best times.
Sure, and presumably you can set these all up. So if you know the best time to post something is at 11 o'clock at night, it doesn't mean you've got to stay up till 11 and press the button, does it? It means you can set those in all in advance?
Luckily, yeah, there are lots of scheduling tools. I think just sort of before I got into it, I think there wasn't scheduling as such for TikTok, which luckily now there is, because I know oftentimes TikTok's most kind of active hours are the middle of the night, because that's when people are scrolling. So luckily, yeah, there are lots of scheduling tools, so we don't have to be up manually posting things at 5 a.m. or midnight.
Sure. Okay. Sarah, another question here. What's the biggest social media mistake that you've seen? Or maybe most frequent example of sort of bad social media content and communication that you see? Perhaps why your clients would then ask you to go in and work with them, for instance.
Not having a strategy and posting for the sake of it, meaning they're posting, they don't really know how to speak to their audience, what type of content works. And that's actually when I usually tend to go in and help businesses. But I think that's probably one of the key ones. And with that, I feel that it means that they're broadcasting their messages, so they're not really having a conversation. And by doing that, then you don't get the engagement. Then, as Lily was saying, your post doesn't get good reach. It means it doesn't get shown to more people. So it's almost a knock-on effect. And I think for me, it's always starting with having a strategy. It's important to know what you're doing on social media and why. Yeah, that's probably from my point of view, I think that one of the biggest mistakes.
Sure.
Lily, there are many others.
Lily, anything else that comes to mind? Perhaps something you studied when you were looking at social media?
I think a lot of the most kind of common mistake and the biggest mistake is, as Sarah said, not having a strategy and just posting whatever because you think you need to be posting, and actually that's kind of damaging your profiles a little bit. But I do also think that not tailoring your content for specific platforms can be quite damaging. If you've written content, you've written a post to go out, and you've just copied and pasted it and posted it on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, that's not really going to work for you, because on LinkedIn, people are looking for something completely different to what they're looking for on Instagram. You might have included a link in that content, which isn't going to work. If you've copied and pasted that onto Instagram, it's not going to be clickable. You might have some more hashtags on Instagram than you would on LinkedIn or Facebook, and they're not going to be really very useful on there. And sort of your graphic sizes and things like that are all going to be in the wrong dimensions. And I think that could be quite a common mistake as well, just kind of thinking, oh, well, we'll just put one post out everywhere and that'll cover all of our bases. But actually that content needs to be a little bit more tailored to suit the platforms.
Sure. Okay, no, that makes sense. Another question that's just come in, it's possibly the last question we're going to get to. So if you have got any other burning questions, do try and get them in kind of right now, so I can make sure that we get them in before we run out of time. So the question is it possible to get into jobs that are purely social media jobs rather than other aspects of digital marketing like SEO or email marketing? I definitely prefer the social side myself, so would prefer to stick to that if possible. Sarah, let me come to you first.
Yes, there is 100%. So you can just have a social media marketing role. Depends again on the company and how big the business is. Sometimes there's, within the digital marketing team, you will have someone that focuses on email marketing, someone on PPC, someone on programmatic, someone on social. There are literally many, many different roles. So social media marketing itself is definitely just a role that you can do. Whether that's independently or for a business or an agency, and then within that you would focus on some of the tasks that I mentioned at the very beginning, so specifically just managing social media accounts for clients.
Sure. I mean, Lily, would you expect someone who's doing that role as a bespoke role to be working for a large company rather than perhaps a smaller company where it might just be a bit of an outreach of their wider marketing team?
Yeah, I do kind of, I mean, obviously our team is very different and I don't have that much experience working in other teams where we all kind of do a little bit of everything. I do expect to see that more in kind of bigger companies where they have a marketing department, and within that they've got their digital marketing team and they've got someone doing email marketing, someone just working on social media. I think in smaller agencies and smaller marketing departments, if you're working for one business, say hairdressers or something, and you are their digital marketing person, I think you're going to be expected to do a lot more, because you become kind of a tech whiz, you become a bit of a social media whiz for a lot of people, and so they will be asking you to do lots of other different things for them as well.
For sure. Okay, thank you. Hopefully that answers that question, and indeed all of the questions that you've submitted for us this afternoon. My one ask of you, for those of you that are watching this live at the moment, just give us a little bit of feedback if you could. So if there's something you found particularly useful today, just drop it into that questions tab again so we can use that and we can reflect on that. So anything that you've gained today, just let us know how it's been, this webinar has been of benefit and of use to you. Sarah, just going to move on to the further reading section now. So you've given me some examples of some podcasts that you perhaps recommend people might tune into. There's some books there as well. I mean, you don't need to go through all of those, but which ones are there would you perhaps recommend that someone go away now and find out a little bit more about or subscribe to?
I think from the podcast, Geek Out with Matt Navarra is really good. He's a social media expert, well known within the industry, and he's got a really good newsletter as well that I'm subscribed to. So I think that's probably one that's really good. And then books. The thing with books, they change quite a lot. I think some that I've listed here are, I feel like, the more classic ones that probably a lot of marketers have read. And I think it's just because it changes so much. These are probably some of the key principles that are quite good to read, I'd probably say. But to stay up to date with social media, I definitely recommend signing up to newsletters and listening to podcasts, I think, more than anything.
Sure. And then Lily, so I didn't prepare you with this question, so you might not have anything else to add at all, but equally you might do anything else that you'd recommend people read or listen into or find on YouTube that will help bring them into the world of what someone in social media does.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of LinkedIn and Instagram accounts that you can be following. Again, I know we mentioned earlier about getting onto LinkedIn. It's so important to get on there and start having a look around, making those connections, but you can also follow topics on LinkedIn. So following things like digital marketing or social media, and then you'll be kind of updated with industry news and things like that. And that is really useful to get into that kind of habit of just keeping an eye on everything that's going on. Personally, I follow Girls in Marketing on Instagram, who they're often kind of updating with different trending topics, social media updates, sort of tips and tricks for marketing. And I believe they have just started a podcast as well, which I haven't listened to yet. So don't hold me to that recommendation if you do listen to it. But yeah, there's lots of different kind of marketing accounts with various little tips and tricks for you all over social media.
Sure, fantastic. Hopefully some really good tips for you there then, so you guys can all find out a little bit more about these worlds that we've just spoken about. So finally, just in closing, first of all, thank you to all of you, particularly those of you that have attended live and submitted your questions and contributed and interacted to us within this session here. We've had some really lovely feedback come in already, which is great. On the screen at the moment, again, you can see just a reminder of the HOP website and all of our social media platforms. Lily and her team are going to be doing so much work on this to make sure that it's far better presented than it is at the moment. But you can have a look. That QR code on the left-hand side will take you through to our virtual webinar library here, where we've got best part of 100 of these webinars, similar format to this that we've recorded over the last few years. So there's definitely something for everyone in there. So have a look around it. Do show it to your family and friends as well. But finally, in closing, let me in particular thank Lily and Sarah for sharing their experiences, knowledge and insights with you. You've both been incredibly inspirational for us. I've learned a lot from you today, and I'm sure everyone watching has as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
We wish you all a very, very pleasant evening and best of luck with your future careers.